What's up guys, this is Anime Crossover. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was Reborn as Zeus. The end, and if you did enjoy the video, give it a like, and if you much I like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 20 Naruto's perspective. The environmental damage was near astronomical, only mitigated by the fact that it hit Hyperion right in the chest rather than the Earth herself. It was a fate worse than death, because unlike mortals who died when blasted into 1,000 pieces, immortals like Hyperion were still alive in an aware coma, so as long as they have the willpower, they will eventually reform after thousands of years. Depending on how powerful you are, one could reform faster, but if they faltered, their consciousness would fall into a deep slumber from which they could never be woken. Kronos had done it to Uranos, and Naruto was about to do the same to him.
Naruto was well aware of the moral ramifications of submitting someone to such a heinous destiny, but this was battle, and there was no room for empathy in conflict.
Everything within a 10-mile radius had been completely destroyed. Where there was once grass, a burnt crater had taken its place. Trees that had once stood proud and tall had been reduced to nothing but the finest of ashes, and if there had been any living thing that had remained behind while the lightning struck, it was impossible to tell because the smell of the pure concentrated blast of lightning permeated the air.
Naruto had gone in a crack of displaced air the minute the lightning struck, not wishing to be trapped in the blast.
Returning to where Hyperion had been lying, bolt in hand, to check his handiwork. When the bolt struck Hyperion in the chest, it reappeared in Naruto's palm as if it had never departed. The 4 children of Styx, who appeared beside him, looked horrified and awestruck at the event. Nike looked around for any indication of Hyperion, and when she saw nothing but dazzling ashes, she let out a huge whoop, with Bia and Kratos joining her afterwards. Naruto, on the other hand, took his time looking about, his face purposefully expressionless. Naruto raised his hand to look at the lightning. This is power, he reflected to himself. He conjured himself a sack to collect Hyperion's scorching ashes. It's time we go back, he cried, returning his focus to the 4. It won't be long until one of Kronos' allies arrives to see what's going on. They vanished in a split of displaced air, grasping his arm. They were staring at the blackened remains left by the bolt 1 second. The next thing they knew, they were back on the Greek island of Crete. The primeval goddess Gaia awaited them, appearing angrier than Naruto had ever seen her. She didn't look much different than the previous time Naruto saw her, except she now had Cryo's head bound to her avatar's waist. "What have you done to my son?" she screamed, her gaze fixed on the bag tied around Naruto's waist. Naruto gave his 4 companions a look that indicated he intended to undertake this alone. They nodded and walked away, casting concerned glances at the 2. Naruto pulled the bag from his belt and turned to Gaia once they were out of earshot. "Here," he said, holding out the bag to her, "he's in here." "You could have just decapitated him, like you did with Krios," she said angrily. When his name was spoken, the head of Krios began cursing furiously. "Quite." Gaia yelled back, "I may not be able to hear you, but I know what you're thinking." The head immediately ceased speaking, instead casting malevolent stares at Naruto. "Krios was a test for my siblings," he said, "for the rest, going all out is the only way we will beat them. So you're going to deliver more of my sons in bags for me?" she insisted. "It's war, Gaia," Naruto sighed, "and by the time we're done, many immortals will be in bags." Her annoyance with the situation was palpable to him. On the one hand, she loved her offspring and desired they could all love each other, but she knew the Hecatoncheires and Cyclops would never get along with the Titans after their long confinement. "Gaia, I understand your frustration, but the Titans have had all the time in the world to change their ways, but they didn't, and they won't," he continued. Naruto approached Gaia and pushed the bag into her hands. "When I defeat them and establish my reign, you may begin to revive them if you wish," he comforted. She moaned forlornly and walked away, holding the bag in her hand. It would not have been good for us if she had abruptly withdrawn.
He made his way to the cave, breathing in relief. Atlas perspective. Mount Othrys is the location. Atlas.
Outside his bedchamber, a voice yelled, rousing him from the domain of Hypnos, the god of sleep. He walked up from his bed to the door, furious at the disruption. He stuck his head out the door to gaze at the winged rainbow goddess Ark, messenger of the Titans.
"What?" he exploded. Any other immortal would have shuddered in horror at the sight of Atlas's angry visage, but Ark was protected by the great Kronos because of her duty.
Looking up at him, she said, the Titan King Kronos wishes for an audience with you."
Atlas felt a shard of fear pass through him. Through the poker-faced arc, he couldn't tell how bad the situation was. "What's the problem?" Atlas was contacted. Her face was filled with a small smirk.
"If the king had wanted me to tell you, I would have already told you."
She turned and said to him over her shoulder, "Don't take too long, he's angry." She spread the word when the message was delivered.
She spread her multicolored wings and flew away, leaving a kaleidoscope trail of light behind her. Atlas went back to his room to change into more acceptable attire. "Atlas, what's going on?" His concubine Oceanid nymph spoke forward, alarmed by the noise.
"It's nothing, Metis, I've just been called up to the throne room," he informed her.
Atlas had no idea why he seemed to trust her more than his nymph wife Pleon. She appeared so genuine to him, he couldn't help himself. Why is something wrong? She was curious. Atlas shrugged and replied, "When I get there, I will know." He went away from her and exited the room. The journey to the royal room was uneventful. Immortals of all stature were all outside, standing on the long balcony with scared expressions, pointing to the dark sky. Looking up at the night sky, Atlas couldn't help but note that the stars were brighter than usual today, but a closer glance revealed the truth. The stars were not brighter tonight, but closer, as the sky had migrated closer to the top of Mount Othries. Urano's celestial body, which had been kept back by the presence of his 4 terrible sons, was edging closer to Gaia, as if it planned to crush her in a bare embrace. "Uranos draws nearer," a random immortal murmured.
The breathtaking view of the sky reminded him of stories his father told him and his siblings about the days when Uranos reigned supreme.
How could this be? Uranos has never been so close to victory since his defeat. Unless, of course, another of the 4 has been attacked. He increased his pace to a slow run as he approached the throne room, where he found Kronos pacing fiercely on his dais in front of his 2 remaining siblings and 1 additional Titan who, unlike the brothers, was bowing in subservience. Koios, master of the north and Titan god of foresight, intellect, and knowledge, was one of the 2 brothers. Iapetus, lord of the west and Titan god of mortality, pain, and brutal deaths, was the other.
Pallas, Titan god of warfare and warcraft, son of the Titan god Krios and the goddess Eurybia, was the last one. Atlas reflected as he fixed his gaze on his father.
Atlas approached the dais and knelt alongside Pallas, his head bowed in submission. "Ah, you're finally here." Kronos took note. He indicated outside. "You must be aware of what is going on." Atlas' head remained down when he replied, "Yes, my lord." Kronos sat back on his chair and stared down at him, saying, "Hyperion was last seen flying high above in his golden chariot in the east. I want you to find out what happened to him, and Pallas will help you in your search." "My lord, please forgive me for saying so, but wouldn't it not be best if I went alone?" Atlas begged Kronos. His head rose. "And get taken down by them?" Pallas interjected. Atlas glared angrily at him. "I am not a pushover." He bit back, his mouth forming a malicious smirk as he added, "Unlike you, who got beaten up by his own children." "You dare to—" "Enough," Kronos yelled, "no infighting among us. If you have even the slightest bit of common sense, boy, you will do as I say, no questions asked," he said to Atlas. Atlas would knelt even lower than he is now if it were physically feasible. "My lord, I live only to serve." Those statements seemed to please Kronos for the time being, until he looked out the window and saw the sky cautiously moving down a few more miles. Kronos burst into flames of fury and frustration at the sight. "No!" exclaimed Kronos. Kronos roared in defiance, conjuring his fearsome scythe and raising it high at his father. When faced with predators, Atlas might see the sky coming back upwards in an almost deer-like pattern in the presence of the scythe. When Kronos noticed his father's departure, he turned back to face the 2 still kneeling titans and spoke in a firm tone. "You will go, and you will find out exactly what happened to him." "Am I clear?" "Yes, my lord," the 2 agreed. They both stood up and walked out, one with the intention of finding out what had happened before the other. A cloaked figure crept stealthily through the lifeless forest where the underworld's goddess of witchcraft had built her abode. The trees in this forest were gnarled and twisted, and with no indication of leaves on them, it was pitch black rather than the different colors that tree bark usually exhibited.
Patches of ghostly appearing grass that grew out of the dark dirt swayed in the non-existent wind. These grasses shone hauntingly slowly in the color of moonlight, bringing light where there would otherwise be none. Tied behind the hooded man was a giant pig-like beast that resembled a normal hog but for its size and the dark black wings that protruded from its sides like bird wings. The beast had stopped battling as ferociously as it had with its capturer, almost as if it had accepted its fate, whatever it may be.
The entrance to the witch goddess's cave was a long, tight tunnel lined with blazing torches. The hooded person traveled deeper and deeper till he came to a rather large opening. The domain of the witch goddess was more workplace than home to the hooded man's bright golden eyes, with shelves lining the sides of the walls holding all kinds of potions, some foul-smelling while others smelled as sweet as a rose. Bodies of dead animals of all sizes hung from the ceilings, and the spare bed on the far left side of the room. She jumped to her feet as fast as she could. "My lord Kronos," she stammered, "why have you come to my humble abode?" Kronos yanked on the rope that held the beast behind him, yanking the beast forward. "Many say you're gifted in the arcane arts," he exclaimed loudly before handing her the increasingly anxious animal and settling himself on the floor. "I'd like you to find certain people for me." Hecate held the animal with unusual affection.
"You mean the rebels, my lord?" she inquired. Kronos merely chose to stare at her, his gleaming golden eyes piercing her. She took the animal to the other side after realizing he wasn't going to answer her inquiry.
Before tying it on the other side of the room, Hecate placed a clay bowl beneath the beast's neck before summoning a little surgical knife and slicing the beast's neck with pinpoint accuracy. The straining animal's blood flowed forth, filling the basin at its feet. Its struggles got less pronounced till it perished of blood loss. Picking up the bowl, Hecate set it on fire and poured some unknown spices into the boiling blood, all the while reciting bizarre incantations. Avhe nauk belik reg. Nakramal du av nauk belik reg. Dok av ukavorm by nakramal. Du aviasin ukp asin from whaav kodar. Whaav hyavik liwo aviasin ok. Her rich and demanding voice filled the cave, and her mouth formed the unfathomable language of black speech. The blood from the bowl floated up in a thin mist, and the mist of blood hovered in midair, forming pictures and phrases incomprehensible to all but those who had mastered the arts of the occult.
Kronos blinked anxiously. "Well, where are they?" he inquired. "They're on an island, my lord," Hecate replied softly. "Which island?" Kronos inquired.
"My lord, it's the island of Crete." Daybreak arrived without Helios, who was riding the sun chariot to illuminate the universe. The arrival of the primal Oranos had frightened the sun god off his usual regimen, rendering daytime a continuous morning. The mortal, Coeurites, and immortal, gods, nymphs, etc., stood in a large clearing in the center of a forest on the island of Crete. Naruto's allies, Cyclops and Hecatoncheires, all had met here at Naruto's request to deliberate their next plan of action, which had unfortunately turned into a pissing match among the members, the loudest and most adamant of which were Rhea and Bia. While Rhea, supported by her daughters and Bia, argued that the longer they took to defeat Kronos, the harder it would most likely become, and that since they had already defeated 2 of the 4 cardinal titans, there was little reason to continue hiding. Bia's statements were met with nods and roars of appreciation from their more savage members. Rhea, on the other hand, was not one to be ignored for long. "This is insane. If we continue to slaughter the 4 cardinal titans, it will only be a matter of time before Oranos falls upon the earth."
The reality of her statements could not be readily disregarded. The descent of Oranos was an event that terrified every immortal. Just because they could not die a mortal death did not mean they had it any better than their mortal counterparts. The immortals were immune to death, so whenever they were severely injured, their essence reached out to the other parts in order to become whole again. If that process was disrupted in any way, they would be forced to exist as they are or fall into an eternal sleep from which they could never awaken.
Bia opened her lips to respond, but was cut off by Naruto, who put up his hand for stillness. "I have heard your arguments and I believe they both have merits," Naruto said, pausing for a moment to gather his thoughts. "The issue of Oranos' descent is of great importance. Worry, for which I already have a remedy." From the sidelines, Hades inquired skeptically. Naruto nodded. "Yes, I do. The sky, for the time being, is a problem for Kronos, so as long as there is the possibility of even further descent from Oranos, Kronos cannot attack headlong with his brothers in tow." The allies nodded in elated agreement. Of all the titans, Kronos was the most feared for his infamous scythe, which could carve itself while other weapons cut or burned you deep into the psyche, removing chunks of a person's mind with each incision. reducing them to little more than an animal, surviving completely on instincts. Metis raced out of the woodland and onto the clearing, a wild, frantic look in her eyes as she cried to the gathered throng, "Run, they're coming, run." At one point, the clearing erupted into a frenetic scramble. No one there questioned her words, who she was referring to. Naruto nodded to Poseidon, and with a rapid stab, the earth trembled at the strength behind the trident, bringing order to the frightened masses. "Enough," Naruto exclaimed, "panicking will get us nowhere. The Hecatoncheires, children of Styx, my brothers, and I will hold them off while you take the rest to the spot." He spoke again, this time to Metis. Naruto and Metis had discovered an Araya, a mountain primordial god, during their many covert expeditions into the world beyond the island of Crete. Metis' eyes widened slightly at his words. Before sadly nodding, the others quickly proceeded to follow her as she made her way to the aforementioned location. Naruto and the others stared up at the sunless sky, where the two remaining cardinal titans, Kronos and Lapidus, as well as several of the second-generational titans, were riding in their flying chariots. Before they could even set foot on the island, they were bombarded with boulders of varying sizes thrown at them by the Hecatoncheires. One of the larger boulders collided with one of the flying chariots, causing a sickening crunch upon impact, though it was unclear whether it came from the rider or only the chariot. It was impossible to distinguish which chariot was which. The others, not wanting to follow in their unfortunate comrades' footsteps, dodged and weaved their way to the island. Another boulder hit a chariot. Unfortunately for the rebels, its rider had anticipated the attack and leapt out of the way, landing on the small beach that was the island. The natural doormat of the island, the Titan god Lapidus landed on the beach, a murderous grin on his face.
Despite his unappealing expression, he was an attractive man, standing at a whopping height of over 12 feet of sinewy muscle. He had an angular, almost halo-shaped face with long straight blonde hair that reached past his solid shoulders. His brown eyes would have been more inviting on any other person, but on him, it shone with the slightly mad glint of a sadist. His pale skin was covered with
scars from self-inflicted wounds number in the hundreds. The monstrous iron spear in his grasp seemed to mirror its master's demeanor. Small and pointed needle-like spikes protruded from the spear's body. The spikes blazed red-hot as if freshly fired. He launched his spear into Cottus, the gigantic spear disappearing completely into the colossal frame of the Hecatoncheire with barely a grunt of pain, until the formerly little spikes grew straight out of Cottus. Cottus screamed in agony as the luminescent spikes became even brighter, and he fell to the ground kicking and screaming, trying with all his effort to get the spikes out. Briars and Gygus both dropped the rocks they held in their hands as they stared in horror at Cottus. Lapidus' spear flew out of his hand with a lifted hand. The spikes fell into Cottus's ready grasp. However, he remained firmly buried in Cottus's body. The opportunity the Titans had been waiting for had arrived, and with the Hecatoncheires distracted, they landed with no more avoidable casualties. "Get him out of here!" Naruto yelled to the Hecatoncheires. Metis, the Titan god of rash actions and violence, jumped out of the ocean where he had previously fallen in and charged forward, battle axe in hand and a roar on his lips as he charged heedless to Koyo's previous orders, barreling straight into Kronos, who, apart from the Hecatoncheires, was the most physically imposing. Kronos, not expecting such a move, faltered a little before balance and unleashed a straight uppercut with his jaw. The force with which Kronos punched Metis generated a shockwave as the Titan god flew into the distance and smashed into the ocean far out in the distance. Atlas let out a rage-filled yell that threatened to destroy the world. As he charged towards Kronos, his arms stretched out in a wrestling stance, he vowed vengeance on his brother's assailant. Kronos' siblings came to his help, encircling Atlas and pummeling him while avoiding and weaving his slower strikes. Pallas, the Titan god of war and battle, charged into the fray, brandishing his sword at Poseidon, swinging at him wildly with the grace of a seasoned soldier, leaving Kronos, Persis, and Lapidus to Naruto. The three Titan gods began to circle Naruto at a slow and methodical pace. Each of them was a fearsome opponent in their own way, and each stride Persis made caused the grass to blacken and collapse, and the sand to disintegrate. Lapidus' spear glowed brighter in preparation of the confrontation. Kronos was the least glamorous of the Titans present, but Naruto had no doubt that he would be the most challenging. Naruto. Kronos continued, "Surely you know the absurdity of resisting. Lay down your arms and surrender, and I pledge to put in a word for you to Kronos." Naruto did not even bother to react, instead summoning his bolt to his side with a determined expression. Koyos sighed deeply before launching an attack. It was only a fraction of a second before the assembled gods began to light up. White light, resembling the splendor of the sun, began to shine into the globe. The pure power seeping from them would have been enough to disintegrate any mortal in their path. Their mortal guises burned away, revealing the gods they were, flesh and ichor ablaze with pure divine force. Lapidus flung his spear at Naruto faster than any mortal sight could track, which Naruto intercepted with a created shield. Before Naruto could lower his shield, he was tackled from behind by Perses, and the force of Perses' tackle propelled them from Crete to the mainland, where Perses began barreling him down the filthy depths of Gaia. Perses caught hold of Naruto's leg and flung him straight up into the air, and he quickly followed, confusing him with a series of kicks and punches that pushed him further up into the air, the sound of each strike resonating powerfully throughout the ether. "Take this." His very voice sent ripples across their surroundings. Boom. A clenched fist to the ribcage, and then there's this. Boom. A knee to the jaw, and this. Perses struck out with a left hook, aiming for Naruto's temple, but was stopped by a recovering Naruto, who crushed Perses' hand to a pulp without any effort. Og! Perses' agonized cry could be heard for miles around. The next thing he knew, he was hit in the face and hurtling down into Gaia at an alarming velocity. In his world of anguish, he neglected to notice his opponent tumbling down to where he lay immobilized. Boom. A sand geyser burst from the striking zone, and the added physical pain was too much for Perseus, who lay bruised and shattered in the tender care of Hypnos. He stood triumphant over Perses until one of Lapidus' luminous needles entered the skin of his right arm, causing Naruto to fall to his knees, more from shock than pain. Lapidus' almost petulant voice cut through the anguish. "Yes, squirm for me, little godling," he said as he blasted another needle at Naruto. "Yes, yes, yes," he said, ignoring Naruto's pain grunt. "Do you understand now?" He didn't bother waiting for a response, instead continuing on as if he hadn't asked, "Do you understand the pure ecstasy of pain?" He discharged another needle, his eyes curling up in delight at Naruto's shriek of pain. "That's enough," a voice said abruptly, "he's not yours to play with as you please." Scowling at the commotion, Lapidus' head swung towards Koyos, who was standing with a disgusted expression on his face. "Will you fight me over this, brother?" screamed Lapidus. "In case you forgot, I don't answer to you." "It is true you don't have to listen to me, you answer to Kronos," Koyos said, his shocked expression revealing that he was not what Lapidus expected. "Which makes me wonder what you're going to say when Kronos discovers you've broken his prison." When Koyos said, "He's going to break sooner or later, what's the point of waiting?" Lapidus raised his spear once again to resume his enlightenment on agony. "When, yes, he will be broken eventually, no doubt about it," Koyos remarked calmly, laying his chin on his palm. "What I doubt is whether or not Kronos plans to do it himself." Koyos' remarks caused a fearful expression on Lapidus' face. "Do it himself?" he asked again. While Lapidus was nominally in control of punishments, there were instances when Kronos decided to take over, especially when it came to persons who had aroused his attention. "He's fine," Lapidus answered, concerned about Naruto's lack of movement. "See," he said as he ran towards Naruto, kicking him in the shins. Naruto suddenly burst into action. Rapping, he twisted his arm viscously around Lapidus' neck, causing an audible snap that could be heard for miles around. Without wasting a beat, he shot his master bolt right at Koyos, knowing full well that Koyos would dodge it, already anticipating its course. "I must eliminate as many as possible before facing Koyos in combat." To his horror, he noticed a thick white substance coming from Lapidus's lower parts. He relished it, the sick bastard. He shook his head, seeking to clear the image from his mind before confronting Koyos, but he knew he was outmatched when he felt cold, unyielding metal slip into his back and out his chest. As Koyos took his blade from him, luminous golden ichor dribbled down his face. Naruto fell to his knees, a look of angry defiance on his face as he glared up at his attacker. Koyos, on the other side, had a regretful expression on his face, saying, "It's over, Naruto, we have the higher ground." He swung his blade violently, intending to cut Naruto's head from his body. The strike flew down faster than lightning, only to be stopped by Naruto's right hand catching the sword. The arctic cold metal dug hard into the holy flesh that dared to come between it and its course. Just as Koyos was about to yank the blade back, his head jolted to the side, and the unseen punch hurled him far into the distance. Hades appeared alongside him, helm and all. "It took you long enough," Naruto grumbled. It wasn't as easy as you put it, finding the right moment took time, Hades mused. Flashback, the Titans were on their way, slowly but steadily approaching the island. Naruto went to Hades after relaying the preparations for different teams, saying, "Of all the Titans arriving, Koyos might be the one I have the most trouble with." "Why are you telling me this?" Hades asked, puzzled. "Because I want to see if his domain of foresight works on you or not," Naruto explained. "I want you to sneak up on him and test it." "Say no more, Naruto," Hades cut in, "I will do it." Naruto's face flashed a slight smile before settling into a focused expression as he called his Master Bolt to his side. Flashback concludes, "It works," Hades replied, a grudging appreciation on his face. "Good," Naruto said, "I'll leave him in your care now. P.S. Sorry for the late update, I was dealing with school-related issues." "It works," Hades admitted, grudgingly. He had a look of appreciation on his face. "Good," Naruto said, "I'll leave him to you. Hands right now." Hades nodded in agreement before fading from sight. Naruto took off and flew far into the sky. "Look for the others." Boom. Crash. Naruto heard the divine's thunderous roar. He was unaware of the battle until he saw it. Atlas was currently engaged in battle with the 4 Scions of Styx, with Kratos appearing to be the only one capable of matching him strike for blow. Each punch from the 2 behemoths sent shockwaves of pure strength rushing into the universe. They generated ripples and tears in the universe. The island held together partially by Gaia could hardly withstand the weight of their combined force, as seen by the massive amount of devastation done. Naruto was so focused on the brawl that he almost missed Kratos' obvious signs of exhaustion. Kratos appeared to be getting fatigued with each exchanged blow. For every hit he managed to land on Atlas, 3 more found its way to him in return. Although Kratos' siblings did their best, Atlas chose to ignore them for the most part, preferring to weather their attacks and focus all of his attention on Kratos. His strategy was short-lived when Naruto appeared from the heavens and pummeled him with a strong swing to the back of his head, sending him falling headlong into the dirt at great distance. Boom. "Naruto," cried Kratos, "What are you, doing here? Is that any way to talk to your rescuer?" Naruto asked, putting his hand down to pull him upright. Bia sneered, pointing to the rising Atlas, "Not much of a rescue. I hate to say it, but we might have to retreat." Her offer seemed to be enthusiastically embraced by all save Nike, who rounded on Bia, her face flushed with rage. "Retreat?" she spit out, disgusted. "You mean run?" "It hardly matters," Zeus said. "We can't defeat him for now, it's either that or be captured and forced to face Kronos' scythe." Nike said, "It doesn't matter, we don't run, running is defeat." Naruto turned to her, his irritation at her unwillingness to back down from a battle visible. "We're not running, we're retreating, and we'll be fine." He explained, "End of discussion." He hissed, "End of discussion." Nike pretended to continue debating, but whatever was about to come out of her mouth froze at the sight of his face. "Fine," she grumbled. He summoned his Master Bolt and launched it at Atlas, taking care not to hit him so hard that he disintegrated. Gra, Atlas' rage-filled howl was cut short as the bolt dropped on him. For a brief moment, it appeared like Atlas would be able to endure the impact, until Naruto sent him even further back and out into the sea with a second blast. "Hold on," he whispered, extending his arm before disappearing in a crack of displaced air. The squeezing and tight sensation that came with traveling across space-time was both fleeting and stifling. Crack. They reappeared at the foot of a mountain whose peak was lost to sight, well buried among the clouds that encircled it. "Wait here while I go get the others," he said, before disappearing from view. Crack. He reappeared exactly where he had left Hades to spar with Koyos, seeing nothing but shattered ground heading eastward. Following the path of destruction, he came across one of the most amusing sights he had ever seen. A weaponless Koyos darted left and right, attempting to flee his invisible foe. Cuts and gashes adorned his body as blazing ichor streamed from his wounds, soaking the earth. He summoned his lightning bolt to his side, and the force and light it emitted drew their attention. "Enough Koyos, summon your men at arms. No one needs to get hurt." Koyos looked venomously at him, evidently unwilling to do so, but he had little option. This conflict was not going as smoothly as he had intended. "All right," he said. He took out a conjured horn, placed his mouth on it, and blew with all the might he could muster. 6 flying chariots driven by Kronos' mortal allies launched off into different parts.
The mortal savior destined for Koios began to dissolve under the combined force of the three gods' real form. His flesh began to evaporate, his blood boiled within him, and his bones broke and disintegrated to dust before their own eyes.
Damn it, Koios shouted as he leapt towards the collapsing carriage.
Come, we have to find Poseidon. Where last did you see him? Naruto rounded on the now visible Hades.
I saw him there last. Hades pointed west, and they took off in that direction when they came across a tired Poseidon.
The ground beneath him was cracked and broken, and it shook every few seconds from the tremors left over from Poseidon's battle with the Titan god of war. Pallas didn't look half as good as Poseidon. As the god of war, his skills worked best when the ground underneath him wasn't violently trembling every few seconds. Exhausted from the cuts and lacerations that covered his entire body, he had given up fighting and was now attempting to run.
Poseidon slipped his trident into his spine and pinned him to the ground, putting an end to his efforts. Poseidon, Naruto yelled, "We have to go," and they vanished in a crack of displaced air, taking hold of both their arms. Boom. The sounds of numerous gods sparring could be heard well above the clouds from the top of Araya, which had been renamed Mount Olympus. The rebel gang had spent the last month preparing for their next and final fight with the Titans, according to Naruto's military advice. Despite the fact that Naruto was not a god of strength, he was the only one powerful enough to endure attacks from Kratos. He reflected on what had brought them to this point. Flashback, crack. The four children of Styx were taken aback when Naruto appeared, accompanied by Hades and Poseidon. "Where are we?" Hades inquired, gazing up at the massive mountain. "It's a base I designed for our use," Naruto stated. "The Titans have theirs, and we have ours. Come on. The others are up there waiting for us," he said, pointing above them to the peak that was concealed within the clouds. While Kratos and his brothers had to climb, the sons of Kronos flew ahead and spotted the others on a more flat portion of the mountain. Naruto discovered them immediately after landing beside them. Rhea smothered him as she sobbed in relief upon his safe return. "Naruto, oh my baby boy," she exclaimed, shocked by the wounds he had endured. "You're hurt, lie down," she said to the other two, "and so are you." Instead of the jubilant expressions he had expected, he saw only defeated or neutral ones. "What happened?" he said, glancing around, "and where is Metis? I'd like to speak with her." They exchanged more regretful and unhappy looks as they gazed at each other, unsure how to break the news. Styx finally spoke up. "She's gone, Naruto." He stared at her for a moment as he processed her words. "Gone?" he shouted, turning to face Rhea. "What does she mean by gone?" Rhea remained silent. "She means she's gone. After Metis led us here, she left to join you," Argus explained, "but she didn't get very far before a sea god, Aegeus, I'm told, came up behind her and grabbed her. We tried everything we could to keep him at bay, but the waves he summoned were far too powerful for us to be of much use," Styx said. Naruto's face flushed with relief as they spoke. "So she was captured," Naruto murmured. "There's still hope. Naruto, I've known Kronos for almost my entire life. The only reason he'd spare Metis would be to lure you in," Rhea said, biting her lip. "It doesn't matter," he said, looking everyone in the eyes. "For too long we've been hiding, attacking them one by one or just reacting to whatever attacks they've sent our way. Well, no more," he declared. "We will take the fight straight to them. We will storm their mountain," he said, summoning his master bolt for additional emphasis. "The stronghold that has stood as the pinnacle of strength and stability will crumble and burn before their very eyes." Bia exclaimed, "Here, here. And from those ashes, we will build a better, stronger world, one in which law and peace triumph over barbarism and conflict." Flashback concludes, and punch to the face abruptly interrupted his thoughts. Naruto was catapulted from the mountain at breakneck speeds and would have collided with the earth if not for a passing cloud. As he glanced at his oncoming opponent, he could feel the bones in his jaw ache from the collision. The god of strength loomed over Naruto, 13 feet of pure divine muscle. He cupped his fists together and brought them down, and Naruto rolled over and swept his legs out from under him in a lightning-fast motion. Kratos' head flew back from a crushing blow to the nose, and ignoring the excruciating pain, Kratos grasped Naruto's calf and lifted him to eye level. He tossed Naruto upwards with an animalistic growl, hurling the god high into the heavens. Naruto changed to an eagle before steadying himself midair, flying at speeds that might easily kill a mortal. When he looked down, he saw an irritated Kratos bouncing from one cloud to the next in an attempt to reach him. Naruto kept out of his reach by dodging and swerving as he pushed him higher and higher. No, not yet. Naruto pondered. Kratos ran at him, grumbling, "Stay still, damn it." Dodge replied, "Not yet." Kratos reached for him once more. Now. Naruto swooped towards Kratos' outstretched hands, 1 second an eagle, the next not. Naruto landed a powerful shot to Kratos' temple. Kratos was launched hurtling through ether at breakneck speeds, and unlike Naruto, the clouds were powerless to stop him. He appeared more like a meteor for the short seconds he was rushing into Gaia, spinning madly out of control in a light with friction-induced flames. Kratos collided with the earth, resulting in a mile-deep trench. Naruto was about to resume his journey, admiring his work, when he heard an ear-piercing scream coming from the mountain where he had left the others. "Does that look like Hera?" Crack. Weapons were pulled in reaction to 2 strangers, a man and a woman, both of whom appeared to be trying to calm them down. The man was gorgeous in the way most immortals were, youthful and full of vim. He appeared right beside the others. Was a tanned muscular man of average height, with brown hair cascading down from his head to his shoulders and vivid orange eyes that seemed to glow with wisdom beyond his apparent age. The woman, on the other hand, was the more outgoing of the two. She was a stunning woman with black as night hair and golden eyes, but her most distinguishing feature was a gigantic pair of multicolored wings that adorned her back. "No, not Arc," Ria corrected. "Iris, another of Thomas's," Naruto heard Styx spit venomously. "That hardly explains how they found us," Hera pointed out. That was correct. Naruto had deliberately chosen this location due to its remoteness from Mount Othries. Though it wasn't the tallest mountain on Gaia, it was large enough to support a city. "Yes," Bia acknowledged. "How did you find us?" The two exchanged glances before the man replied, "It was Metis. She knew of my dislike of the status quo, so she told us where you were." Naruto looked up, astonished. "You've talked to her, and you know where she is?" "Yes," the man replied. The reassurance relieved Naruto of the tight knot of worry he had learned to live with. "They know where she is, thank chaos." He was so deep in contemplation that he didn't notice Poseidon approaching him until he spoke. Naruto. Poseidon queried, "Surely you're not? Will they genuinely believe them?" Naruto did not respond, instead looking towards, "What's your name?" The man inquired, pausing to consider his argument, "I am Prometheus." Several weeks afterwards, numerous mortals and immortals, Kronos supporters, perched atop the clouds or flying chariots that surrounded the pinnacle of Mount Othries, but like a force of nature, everywhere Naruto turned, lightning followed, and he carved a path through the line that stood between him and the peak of Mount Othries. "This is getting old," Naruto thought as he blasted another of Kronos' allies backwards with a summoned lance of lightning from his master bolt. Fighting immortals was not as epic as one would truly expect. For one, the battle could be dragged on for an eternity if either one vehemently refused to give way to the other, and another the sight of burned and mutilated bodies rise up once again to continue to fight was not a sight that one would call glorious when seen firsthand. All Naruto and his companions could do was advance in the hope of getting closer to Kronos.
Prometheus' point of view. Boom, boom, went the noises of the immortal gods clashing with one another high above the dirty and dimly lighted dungeons hidden deep within Mount Othries.
Prometheus said to his mortal inventions, "This way." Each of them was equipped to the teeth with Cyclops-forged weapons. They may not have been as powerful as Naruto's bolt, but they were still extremely handy. Contrary to Prometheus' beliefs, there appeared to be a minimal number of people kept within the dungeons, but he was unconcerned because whatever made his job easier. They proceeded deeper and deeper till they came to a door where they could hear screaming. They managed to break down the door with a couple of heaves. Within was a stunned mortal Lapidus follower who was in the middle of administering his go. "Metis receives D's love message." "My lord Prometheus," exclaimed the guy, "what are you?" Prometheus grasped his head and twisted, "With these hands, I formed you in your entirety, and with these hands, I end you." The mortal's corpse dropped to the earth, his eyes and lips widening in horror. He cautiously looked around to see Metis being untied from her straps by his mortal servants. "Thank you, Prometheus," Metis said as he struggled higher. With the exception of her face, her body was covered in cuts and injuries, the most visible of which was the empty area at her side where her right arm should have been. "Your arm," exclaimed Prometheus, pointing to her mutilated right arm. "What happened?" Metis cast a disdainful glance at the stump, saying, "Ah yes, my hand." Her right arm stopped where her elbow would have been, with the margins blackened from trying to cauterize it shut. Apparently they don't appreciate it when their hostage tries to fight back, Metis murmured before continuing. Do you have a weapon for me? She inquired of the mortals who had accompanied Prometheus. Prometheus gave her a shocked expression. A weapon? He cried, you are in no shape to fight a mortal, much less an immortal. Prometheus could hardly believe what he was hearing. Give me a weapon, Metis demanded, because I know my limits, and this isn't one of them. Prometheus and Metis burst out of the dungeons and flew high up Mount Othries alongside the mortal army in flying chariots. The fight between the two immortal tribes did not appear to be coming to an end. Metis jumped from the chariot, spear in hand, and charged forward to the nearest of the three opponents she could find, slaying him with the spear. As she wrenched back her spear, blood splattered from his wounds, and the mortal fell like a puppet with its strings severed. The other two, still taken aback by her presence and the sudden loss of their companion, did not react quickly enough. With a rapid flick of her palm, she relieved the second mortal of his head. She rushed forward the last of 3 times, beginning with a feint to the left, followed by a swift uppercut to the mortal's sides. His knees buckled, but he remained upright, much to Metis' amazement. The man launched his own counterattack. It was a quick arc aimed square at Metis' throat, but her previous training had sharpened her combat skills to an astounding degree, and she simply dove beneath it, sweeping his legs from under him in one seamless action, flipping up to a standing position, and jabbing her spear clean through his face. Golden ichor oozed from the man's facial puncture, flowing down and lubricating the floor. Wow, Prometheus remarked, that was certainly something. She turned to Prometheus, astonished by his abrupt appearance, and said, make sure those two don't come back and kill you. Cause any more problems, she continued, pointing to the 2 mortals, and make sure one of them stays that way for a while. Your wish is my command, Prometheus said with a cheeky smirk before bowing to her. The looming presence of the sky loomed dangerously close to the pinnacle of Mount Othries. The end of an era awaited her, so Metis resumed the Clin MB. I really hope you know what you're doing, Naruto. Kronos' point of view. The Titan King peered in perplexity at his surrounds, from Uranos' rapid descent to the vast pile of wreckage that previously stood as a sign of his unrivaled might. Crack, boom, crack. The thunderclap caught the attention of Kronos, turned to look for the miserable forging his way from his own loins in his direction. At that moment, rage beyond words poured into him. The realization of the source of all his problems, his grasp on his scythe tightened to such an extent that unbelievable degree, he could practically hear it. The pressure causes a creak. Kronos' angry howl was erg, as he chopped and pushed his way to his rebellious offspring are also possible. Naruto, yelled Kronos fiercely, you did this. Finally, the moment has arrived. The battle had been anticipated by both parties. That would decide the relationship between father and son. The fate of the entire cosmos is at stake. The two had a heated argument, already chosen, because the two knew they both know in their hearts that none of them may actually live while the other perished. The duo in a nearly practiced the pure synchronicity began to sparkle. The white light of two became much brighter as they moved, neared one another. Many people were affected by the intense light they created. Many lesser gods were frightened and evaporated. Mortal humans who dared to look upon them. Kronos made a downward slash with his scythe. The swing's sheer force and quickness. Naruto retaliated by setting fire to the air, blocking his master bolt above his head, preventing the scythe from advancing any farther. The ramifications of that brief encounter between the 2 titans shattered the sound barrier, generating a seismically significant shockwave that knocked aside those who were surrounding for miles in all directions. Lightning bolts flew from Naruto master bolt, striking both comrades and adversaries. Get back, yelled Naruto, a familiar voice. Metis' status is acknowledged. He noticed her out of the corner of his eye, swinging her spear angrily and commanding both away from the mortal and immortal allies' fight. Naruto had moved in a split second. Kronos studied his surroundings before releasing his. He removed his right arm from his scythe and administered a gut, delivering a gut-wrenching strike to Naruto. The younger deity was thrown from the cliffs. Mount Othries at breakneck speed with a winged Kronos is now hot on his tail. Naruto smashed through a slew of clouds, encircled Mount Othries' peak until he finally found one powerful enough to Naruto could feel his flaming descent coming to a halt. Many aches and bruises all over his body. The Titan King makes excellent use of his wings, flew as fast as he could towards his wicked offspring. As far as he could and swung his fearsome scythe, intent on putting an end to this once and for all rebellion. Only for Naruto to vanish at the last second. Rather than impaling itself deeply into instead of Naruto's head, as intended, it was Naruto's left shoulder, deep within. The voice of Kronos says, "Go chaos, damned brat." Created tremors within the body in his actual form. Ether that sounds like thunder. Naruto does not pause for a second, grasped his scythe, which was still lodged in his, before unleashing a devastating kick to the hit to Kronos' solar plexus, Titan King crashing from the heavens till he landed on his back with a thud. Mother. Naruto pulled the scythe and clutched it as golden ichor seeped from him as forcefully as he could. His gaping wound, but Naruto knew that was not the case. He could be convinced it was the least of his concerns. Memories evaporate from his mind against his will. Mind as if they had never existed. "Riss," Naruto yelled, his voice thundering, holding the scythe out. In response to Naruto, the rainbow goddess call emerged unexpectedly in front of him. Before grabbing the scythe and flying up, she proceeded to wave the flag towards Uranos.
Back and forth, yelling at the top of his lungs, her lungs, while also attempting to avoid and weave through the Hechatanchair's massive stones littered the heavens. Tired of seeing her intimidation attempts, Naruto returned his gaze to his father.
He mumbled, rolling his still achy shoulder, "Wait, where were we?" Naruto went into battle once more, this time with a bolt in his hand. Meanwhile, crash, boom, sounds of a fight between the furious Atlas, the Titan deity, and the four Styx children emerged from the foothills of Mount Othries. In contrast to their prior confrontation when the Titans had taken them by surprise with their abrupt appearance. The children of Styx had prepared an ambush. The Cyclops had prepared weapons for them. Gaia, the ever-powerful woman, wielded a spiky baton that she used with awe-inspiring cruelty. Zeus with his weapon of he chose the longsword and wielded it, slicing here as like an artist wielding a paintbrush, and there, greasing the environment with the color of gold ichor. Nike had a pair of gleaming, metallic shoes in her back pocket. She used her wings effectively as both a weapon, both offensive and defensive. Kratos wielded a pair of bronze knucklebones, dusters. Atlas thought Kratos was the best of the four, the most deadly, and the source of so much of his every punch he received drew attention to him. Two of them striking each other caused a pure power wave that lasted kilometers, pits and gashes within the earth itself. Despite the fact that Kratos was the most troublesome, the other three did not relent in their flurry of attacks that enraged Atlas even further than he was already. Atlas's thunderous voice alone says, "Damn you." His two blood-red eyes distorted the ether around him. Red eyes glistened not just in the light of Godhead, but with a look of rage on his face. He clenched his fist and sank it into Kratos' sides. Kratos' considerably smaller body was launched into the air at breakneck speeds through the air, destroying hills and everything else, hurdles that previously stood in the way of kilometers away, coming to a standstill with a boom. "Brother!" Nike shouted as he saw Kratos. She turned, her eyes tossed before her like a toy. Her wings were directed ahead in a forward motion towards Atlas. Stabbing motion. With the ease of a guy swatting a feather away, he avoided her onslaught and kept her close, and started squeezing. "To pee, bitch," he said, "3 utterly entirely your brother." "Fly." His words were cut short by a sharp stab. By Zeus. The sword was clean in from the start. His tummy protruded from his back. Atlas roared in rage, refusing to let go. He twisted around, reaching out for Nike, extending his flaming hand, ready to grasp of the offended god. That's when Gaia decided to intervene. Atlas reeled from the punch to the head, finally releasing the constricting Nike. His hand shot up to cradle his injured skull, his eyes flooded with tears, his hands shot up with unrestrained fury, unfathomable speeds. Gaia's gorgeous face collapsed instantaneously as a result of the pressure. Urga. Golden ichor with saliva, Atlas's enormous fist coated her as he sent her flying is also an option. "Gaia!" Zeus exclaimed as he ripped the sword from his grasp from Atlas, and with a furious cry began to attack. Deep swung his blade as fast as he could. Atlas developed gashes, and Nike, the two of them redoubled their efforts. They each took turns attempting to keep the Titan god of equilibrium. "By my own hands, I've brought him low," Naruto exclaimed, just as Kronos brought the old king's reign to an end. He motioned towards Iris, directing the scythe to be placed in his hand. Kronos stared in complete terror at the scythe in Naruto's hand. No, son, please. I bring an end to his. No, please, don't. He swung the scythe around. Thud, asterisk though he couldn't feel anything below his neck, the Titan King let out a blood-curdling shout of shock and anguish, knowing his member had been severed totally. Over the former king screaming, Naruto continued to speak, if any of you would like to object to my rule, let him speak up now or forever hold their silence. No one, not even the Titan brothers, did. All of the Titan fans began kneeling wherever they stood, mortal or immortal, until only the two Titan brothers remained standing. Do you have something to say, uncles? Naruto inquired. Lapidus sought advice from Koyos, but the Titan simply shook his head. It's pointless, brother. We've been beaten, Koyos said as he lowered his blade. Hail Naruto, Lord of the Universe, he agreed. Hail Naruto, Lord of the Universe. Timeskip Metis approached Naruto with a look of unease as he stood away watching the Hecatoncheires at work. How are you doing? She inquired. I'm fine, Naruto responded, frowning at the distance, we'll figure it out. Flashback boom and crackle asterisk as an injured Naruto in a winged chariot raced down Mount Olympus, dark clouds lingered over the ground as thunder and lightning shook the heavens. A chariot crew followed him as well, carrying numerous mortal and immortal pals. Naruto, come back, yelled Metis. It was debatable if Naruto heard her over the thunder, but he continued. The four were flying by his side in separate chariots, each bared their weapons in anticipation. They had finally broken through the thick sheen of clouds and could see the earth itself. Gaia, Naruto bellowed and sent a lightning bolt ahead. Pure focused electric energy surged forth, wreaking heavenly vengeance on the planet. Gaia, Naruto screamed out again, followed by another hit. Shards of the chariot scattered over the ground after crashing straight into the ground with barely a scratch. This time, Naruto raised his master bolt. Gaia, face me, you traitor. Naruto stood for a minute, his arm poised to hurl the lightning bolt at her. After a few seconds, a woman-shaped figure began to emerge from the earth itself, just a few meters in front of him. From the top of the figure's head to the soles of her feet, she was constructed up of random pieces of rocks, valuable materials, and soil sticking out of her with no discernible pattern, grass in place of physical hair, and a tangle of vines, leaves, and flowers of various colors and sizes on her head. What? She smirked. You know exactly what, he said as he pointed the bolt at her. Naruto grabbed on the knife attached to his belt. This arrogance will no longer be tolerated. By my will alone, Uranos came forth, and by my will he was cast down, she said this time to Naruto. Do you truly believe you can compete with me? It's not feasible. You're powerful, I won't deny that, but so were Uranos and Kronos, Naruto said back, eye to eye. However, they were vanquished. You say impossible, I say impossible. He stretched back his arm, lightning bolt in hand. You insolent, her comments were cut off by a flash of lightning. Flashback concludes. Asterisk, are you sure this will work? She asked, motioning to the Hecatoncheires. Of course it will work, Naruto responded, he was practically built for it. The two were discussing the figure in between the Hecatoncheires, none other than the Titan Atlas. Naruto and his supporters had spent the month following the war's end tracking down and securing any Kronos allies who had participated in the conflict. Most of the people had automatically supported the Titan King, so if Naruto had made it essential to toss them all away, Tartarus would very certainly be full. Mortal combatants were burnt without hesitation, however punishments for immortals required more contemplation. Naruto, with the help of Themis, began putting the immortals in the Cyclops' many holding cells until wiser decisions could be made. But the question of the sky could not be delayed any longer, and Atlas' fate could not be changed. Come on. Naruto stated, he transformed into an eagle, with Metis following him in the guise of a hawk. They followed the Hecatoncheires upwards. It took some time because Atlas would not go readily, but they eventually made it. Cottus, Yiga said, grab onto that side. Briars held down the Titan as the other two worked on pounding the spikes into the mountain. Together, they were able to attach Atlas to the mountain. No stop, he cried as he strained and tugged, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't free himself. The chains that shackled him were not ordinary iron or steel chains, but chains formed of darkness itself, from the same substance that was used to bind him. The evening. Naruto and Metis descended from the heavens. When Atlas saw them, he began pleading for mercy. Naruto, please do not do this. Anything but this, he begged. Naruto did not respond, standing stone-faced and staring at the Titan. Atlas must have realized the futility of his efforts since he instantly shifted his focus to Metis. Metis, he screamed, stop them. She averted her gaze, a guilty grimace on her face. Please, Metis, talk to him. Please, she did not respond. Do not attempt this. Naruto summoned his lightning bolt to his side and released a powerful pulse. What? Atlas looked about, perplexed. And then it started. A rainbow streak sped off into the distance, abandoning the heavens in favor of the earth. Almost quickly, the heavens followed suit, and it began to descend, the weight of its presence enormous. Naruto felt like an insect in the presence of such a huge power, waiting to be squished. The Hecatoncheires fled, unwilling to wait for their hated father's body to meet them, brain dead or not. No, 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 no. Atlas' voice was filled with fear as he saw his grandfather's celestial body descend to meet him. Come on, come on, come on, work, Naruto pleaded. Metis. Why? He asked, staring her in the eyes. Why is this the case? The living corpse of the ancient monarch met him, and he was forced to carry it on his shoulders by an extreme desire for self-preservation. Come on, Metis, we have other things to do, Naruto said, turning around. Metis averted his gaze, refusing to look back at the Titan. Helios continued his trek across the sky as promised, far to the horizon. The start of a new era. Og, get him out, get him out, get him out. Screams of labor could be heard throughout the newly erected palace on Mount Olympus.
Metis lay on a bed in one of the palace's many apartments, her legs spread apart.
Leto stood in front of her, arms outstretched, ready to welcome the baby. Metis' face flushed with sweat and tears as she struggled to push the huge infant through her. At Leto's direction, nymphs raced across the palace, bringing whatever she desired. Naruto caught one of the nymphs as she attempted to get past him. Wait, he said, how is she? The nymph was obviously new to this, as she looked terrified. I don't know who my king is. I have to go, she said, pulling at her wrist. Orders from Leto. Of course, she says with a sigh. The unidentified nymph flew off into the distance, like a chicken without a head. Og. I hope everything goes well in there, Naruto exclaimed, startled by the sounds. The screaming suddenly stopped after what seemed like hours, and Leto emerged drenched in sweat. You can go in now, she addressed Naruto. Naruto raced in to discover Metis laying on the bed, holding a baby. She supported the baby with her left arm and touched his face with her golden magic prosthetic arm. How is he doing? Is it a he? Naruto demanded it emphatically. Metis signaled for him to remain silent. Ah, of course, she said quietly, he's sleeping, he replied in hushed tones. The two of them stared at the new immortal in silence for a few moments, until Naruto spoke up once again. What will you tell him about his parentage? Naruto mumbled. Metis sighed, his stress and fear over the child's father had worsened. I honestly don't know. How does one tell a child that their father is now in chains because of their mother? She admitted. I just don't know, he will seek out his father one day, that I know of, she shrugged. I suppose it is inevitable. Naruto sighed. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, he said, shaking his head. What will you call him? I was thinking. Alexios, she said with a smile, and I think it would suit him best. The infant in question awoke in his mother's arms, his eyes the same albino red as his father's, staring about with obvious wonder before resting on his mother. The child's arms raised and clenched, as if attempting to grasp his mother's hair. Yes, Alexios will suit him well, Metis chuckled as she tickled his cheeks. Naruto stepped out of the room with a smile on his lips hours later. He made his way through a vast hall to find the others who were waiting for him. Naruto. How is she? Poseidon inquired. She's fine, and so is the child, Naruto said, spreading his arms. That's good to hear. At least we know Leto knew what she was doing, Hera said, her arms folded. She was still irritated that Ria had not yet been allowed to leave her confinement to assist with the birth. Naruto chose not to respond, instead turning to face his brothers. Come, brothers, I wish to speak with you. Naruto closed his eyes before bending down to pull off 3 blades of grass as the 3 of them left Olympus, taking a shortcut down the mountain. Here. The 2 gods exchanged glances, their expressions betraying their confusion. Why? Hades inquired. To divide the universe amongst us, there must be a place for us to call ours, Naruto explained. Whoever is the tallest gets the heavens, who is the second tallest gets the sea, and who is the third gets the underworld. The sun god's chariot riding across the sky heralded the arrival of day. A woman emerged from a cave on an island, carrying a jar as she proceeded along a trail towards a body of water not far away. 2 Leons were at her heels, gliding about her, occasionally brushing her legs with their heads. The road opened up to a clearing where the pond was located, and the 2 lions leapt ahead, roughhousing and tumbling each other as they sprinted for the lake. The woman giggled at the ridiculous spectacle and continued walking till she reached the pond, where 2 lions were observed lapping up the water. They raised their heads to gaze at her as she approached, dipped the jar into the water, and began filling it. After filling the jar halfway, the woman marched back the way she came. She whistled to the lions, and they returned to her with dog-like excitement. They continued up the path till they returned to where they had begun. The woman entered, moved up to the fireplace, picked up 2 stones that were nearby, and began striking them together. A few moments later, sparks flew from the stone and landed on the already gathered kindling, and fire quickly spread, throwing shadows across the walls. She took a small pot from the makeshift cabinet, poured water into it, and placed it above the fire. Once the water began to boil, she proceeded to add herb and spice mixtures to the pot. The herbs and spices combined with the water to make a murky green liquid. She went back to get 2 cups, and after a brief delay, she poured the concoction into the cups before sitting down to wait. Minutes passed before the skies outside the cave darkened, lightning flashed and danced over the gray clouds, and the winds increased in speed, scattering dust everywhere. The woman noticed a man approaching her from a distance. He seemed to vanish into the darkness between the flashes of light. As he arrived, the woman rose to greet him, bowing in prayer and saying, "Welcome to my humble abode." "Rhea." The man merely answered. The storm subsided the moment he stepped inside. He moved up to the table that Rhea had indicated for him. She took the mugs and gave one to the man. Silence reigned as the 2 sipped their hot tea. The man immediately drained his cup and tipped it to Rhea, indicating that he desired more. She stood up, carrying the cup with her, and refilled it. Except for the lions roaming and yawns, there was complete silence once more. Rhea had had enough of the silence and asked, "How's the tea?" "It's good," the man said, raising his brows. He wasn't ready to discuss yet, but Rhea had had enough of stillness. "Please," she begged, "tell me what he plans to do with me." "I don't know," the man murmured, his look stretched out. "Are you content? You don't know? So there's still hope," Rhea said again. "He's still angry," the man reflected. "Any and all talk of you has been expressly forbidden. It's as if he wants us to just forget." Ray's gaze lifted to the cave's roof, tears welling up in her eyes, which she hurriedly brushed away. She stood up, walked around the table, grabbed the man's arm, and knelt before him. "Hades, tell me, please. Do you think you can get him to come see me?" she wailed. "Mother, please, Hades," says the narrator. "Try," she yelled. "I'll try." Hades sighed again. "Promise me," she said quietly. Hades remained silent for a time before finally saying, "I promise." She kissed his hand and said, "Thank you." Hades has traveled the vast subterranean area known as Tartarus. He wandered the realm, sullen and resentful of his brother's more colorful realms, looking for a spot to call his seat of authority. There were many mountains and lofty locations within the underworld, but one mountain in particular drew his eye. It was located a few thousand kilometers from the entrance, and its summit was separated into 2 halves, in between which Hades planned to build his castle. "Is this the location?" Brontes inquired. The Hecatoncheires rode behind the Cyclops, pulling truckloads of supplies for the palace, materials that largely comprised of gray marble, obsidian, and silver, as opposed to the white marble and gold Naruto had chosen for his. "Yes, this is the location," Hades responded. Brontos rolled his back, raised his hands in front of his lone eye, and began comparing. Hades' arms were folded. "What exactly are you doing?" "Measurements. Gotta make sure it fits just right," Yigas said. Brontos laid down his hand and cracked his fingers after a few minutes of what appeared to Hades to be stupid hand-waving. "All right, boys. Let's get this done," he said to his brothers. 36 The status quo. The peaceful atmosphere of the forest was abruptly interrupted by the booming sound of hooves reverberating through the trees. It was a stunning symphony, heralding Chiron's entrance. He smashed through the dense undergrowth, emerging into a huge open clearing. "Mother, mother," he said, his voice echoing across the air. "What?" A voice responded to him, Chiron followed the sound of her voice through the lush terrain until he came across her sitting on a smooth stone. The stone gave a cool relief from the heat of the surroundings. He was surprised to find two nymphs fanning his mother with enormous leaves, their actions soft and careful. Chiron stood over his mother with uncontrollable glee, his eyes brimming with expectation and delight. His mere presence emitted an energy that could only be compared to a raging thunderstorm. "Get out of the way, boy," she said, her voice authoritative and exasperated. "Can't you see I'm attempting to tan?" "Oh, I'm sorry." He moved out of the path, still giddy with delight. "Mother, guess what?" he virtually yelled. "The war's over, right?" she said casually to the centaur. "How did you know?" The centaur wondered. "With brains like that, I wonder sometimes if you're truly my son," the nymph said. She directed his attention to the sun, a blazing and burning ball that was being drawn across the wide expanse of the sky in its usual fashion, with a simple motion. "Yes, I suppose that's a good indicator," Chiron said, looking up. "So," he knelt beside her, "are we returning home?" His mother sighed, her eyes scanning the horizon and the beasts that ran free in the distance. "Home," she said again, her voice tinged with yearning. She returned his gaze. "Yes, I suppose it's time." Naruto point of view. The entire environment appeared to be a swirling kaleidoscope of brilliant colors and flashing lights. Everywhere he turned, he was greeted with joyful and glowing faces looking in his direction. They embraced him cordially, extended their hands for handshakes and congratulating him on an unknown accomplishment. However, in this sea of joy, none of these familiar faces were the one he wanted. His eyes darted from side to side, scanning the crowd for a glimpse of the person he was looking for. He moved towards her with his arms outstretched, smiling as he hugged her. She held him back, and he thought it could have lasted an eternity until he felt a stinging agony dart up his side. The lovely scene was disturbed, however, when a searing agony raced through his side. He instinctively pushed away from the woman, startled to his core. When he grabbed for his side, there it was. A cold handle jutting from his back, a knife securely buried in his skin. The situation's horror seized him strongly. He yanked it out of his body with a burst of adrenaline. A trickle of warm, golden liquid began to drip from the wound, soaking his garments and hands as he did so. Panic set in, and he desperately looked around for assistance, only to discover that the formerly pleasant and inviting features had morphed into sneers and smirks, devoid of empathy or sympathy. To his astonishment, each hand that had earlier shaken his now clutched a knife, poised and ready to cause further injury. Naruto jerked awake, shocked by an unknown force. His eaves fluttered open, blinded for a minute by the searing ray of sunlight that filled his senses. He quickly averted his eyes, anxiously seeking relief from the blinding brightness. Helios had resumed his regular ascent across the wide expanse of Kronos, the celestial dome that encircled the planet. Helios' dazzling beams were welcomed with joy, as they poured new life into the surrounding environment. As the sun's golden rays covered the earth below, the once dreary and somber scenery was quickly transformed into a beautiful tapestry of colors. Despite the magnificent vista, Naruto couldn't help but be irritated at being roused from his bed so early in the day. His brow furrowed as he massaged his weary eyes, thinking about the importance of a serious discussion about the timing of Helios' daily responsibilities. Naruto couldn't shake the lingering frustration that welled up within him when he remembered the recent dream. As he reflected on his incapacity to take decisive action in tackling the circumstances shown in his nocturnal vision, a sense of powerlessness gnawed at his mind. This sensation of confinement hung heavy on his heavenly shoulders, leaving him feeling deeply dissatisfied. As he climbed out of his enormous bed, he sighed deeply. "I guess there are some difficulties I won't be able to address." As he prepared to go outside, he swiftly changed into his wonderful silken robes, their smooth texture stroking his skin. His stomach rumbled and his body screamed out to him. Naruto tried to distract himself by thinking about the feast he would shortly indulge in. Prize meats, honey, exotic fruits, and the most delectable drinks were all available to him. As he made his way through the sumptuous rooms, each one more expensive than the previous, Naruto arrived at the vast dining hall of Olympus, which was lavishly decorated. A long table stood in the center, displaying an astounding array of delicacies that were enticingly placed for his delight. Mortal servants stood at attention, awaiting orders from their divine masters. Seated at the tables waiting for him were the two nymphs who had cared for him as a child, his sisters, and, strangely, Hades. Conversations came to a halt as he approached the table, and everyone began to meet him. Good morning to you all as well, Naruto responded, waving his hands and signaling for them to begin. The hall was filled with the sounds of cutlery clanging against gold plates and beverages being sipped and refilled. Naruto leaned back in his chair and stared at Hades after eating his third taste of the dinner. So, how do you like the place? He began. Naruto made sweeping gestures all around them. Hades quickly swallowed before responding, "It's good, too much gold for my taste." Naruto laughed as he took another taste of his supper, savoring the aromas that danced on his wonderful tongue. "I suppose I went a little overboard. Along with it," he agreed, "but you have to admit, it gives the place a certain grandeur." "I have a palace like this being built right now," Hades said, half nodding, half shrugging. "Really, brother, what does it look like?" Naruto asked. Hades took another bite before replying, "Mostly gray and silver, with a touch of black." Hades shrugged at Naruto's gaze. "I thought I'd blend in," Hera interjected, her voice full of pleasure. "I thought it looked wonderful." Naruto looked at Hera, his eyes wide with amazement. "You've been to the underworld?" he inquired, genuinely interested. She nodded, taking another piece from her dish. "Hades invited me." She laid her hand briefly on Hades before returning to her supper. Despite the fact that the movement had been transient, Naruto had observed it.
So, he thought to himself, the changes are already taking place.
He cast a skeptical eye back and forth at the two. He honestly didn't sure how to feel about it. Despite the fact that they were all entities formed of pure energy dressed in body, they were still siblings, and the thought made him queasy. Throughout the rest of the lunch, they kept a quiet atmosphere with minimal talk, interrupted only by occasional directives to the maids. When their plates were empty and their dishes were finished, the maids rushed in to clear the table. Hades gently asked Naruto to remain seated at this time. Naruto agreed with a nod and stayed comfortably seated in his chair as the servants resumed their attentive work around them. As the clinking of kitchenware and hustling of servants diminished, the room gradually recovered its quiet. Hades took a deep breath, preparing to bring up the matter that had been on his mind. "As you are aware, I recently paid a visit to Mother," he said. "You're going to ask me to release her, aren't you?" Naruto could clearly see where this was headed. "No, of course not," Hades insisted. "She said she wants to see you." "Why?" Naruto asked, furrowing his brow, "so she can complete the task." Hades groaned, knowing full well that he did not want to be the one to give this message. "No, I don't think she wants to talk. You consider. What do you think?" Naruto's tone became derisive as he began to rise. "Naruto, please wait. Just pay attention." "Me listen?" "No, you listen. She attacked me, not you, not Poseidon," Naruto said, pointing to himself. "Me. And so, when I say she's staying put," he leaned forward and started whispering, "she's staying put. This conversation is over," he said as he stood to his full height. A majestic palace sat deep beneath the water. This magnificent building was made entirely of beryllios, a rare and attractive stone with a stunning greenish-blue tint. Its elaborate carvings and delicate designs emitted an ethereal appeal that charmed those who saw them. This amazing palace's ceiling was a great marvel to behold, since it was fashioned from an array of gleaming pearls. Each pearl was hand-picked, delicately carved, and expertly arranged to form a magnificent mosaic that glistened like moonlight on the water's surface. A plethora of deities dwell within the beautiful halls of the palace, each finding a niche for themselves within the aquatic depths of Pontus. An enormous party was currently underway to commemorate the triumphant conquest of the Titans by the great Olympians. Poseidon gracefully maneuvered the joyful throng among the revelry. His sinuous merman tail flowed gracefully with his every step. His enormous golden trident shone in the light of the underwater fires beside him. "Poseidon, Poseidon, Poseidon," yelled someone. The deity of the seas turned to face the source of the speech. A sea daimon in the shape of what would subsequently be known as a dolphin raced at him at full speed. The immortal had been Poseidon's closest water friend and his staunchest opponent of Oceanus. "Poseidon!" shouted the dolphin, its panicked and terrified tone visible even on its monstrous face. Poseidon's brow furrowed in perplexity as he gazed past his friend and discovered the source of his problems. Apotamoi, another immortal entity who happened to be a river god and the son of Oceanus himself, was hot on the tail of the dolphin. The river god appeared to be a hybrid of a man, a bull, and a fish. The immortal's eyes were filled with wrath as he swung his head back and forth, attempting with his horns to pierce the dolphin's hide. The sea daimon darted behind Poseidon, letting his snout peek out from behind the god's protecting body. The Potamoi, contrary to Poseidon's predictions, showed no signs of halting or relenting. He persisted in his pursuit of the dolphin, his rage propelling him onward. Poseidon reacted quickly, slamming the butt of his trident into the ground. The hit echoed through Pontus, sending shockwaves cascading across his surroundings. The ground trembled in obedience to the god of the seas beneath his vast power. The music came to a halt. The Potamoi, taken off guard by this abrupt display of force, came to a complete halt. Poseidon's focused wave unleashed from his weapon quickly overwhelmed the Potamoi, rendering him helpless and bringing him to his knees. What is the significance of this? Poseidon's voice rang out throughout the room, echoing off the walls. His previously lime-green eyes now glistened with almighty power. The audience grew silent, with all eyes locked on the Potamoi, waiting for him to explain his conduct. The Potamoi, trembling with wonder, was unable to answer. The cloud of rage that had previously obscured his judgment had long since gone, leaving only terror in its wake. He could do nothing except stare in terror, overwhelmed by the towering presence of this powerful rival for the throne of the oceans. Poseidon's majestic aura grew heavier as he towered above the Potamoi. The chamber seemed to quake under the weight of his holy presence, creating a tense atmosphere. Poseidon's fury has been reawakened, fueled by the Potamoi's daring. The emotions of the sea deity rushed within him, erupting as an incredible burst of raw strength. His trident, a sign of his power and authority, buzzed with electricity as it crackled with each passing instant. Recognizing the gravity of his situation, the Potamoi sought to rise from his kneeling position, but was unable to stand against Poseidon's force. The god's strength anchored him, reminding him of his frailty in the presence of pure divinity. The Potamoi realized the gravity of his error at that moment. He had underestimated Poseidon, unable to grasp the god's true might. He considered the repercussions of his actions as terror grabbed him tightly, knowing that he stood no chance against this tremendous opponent. Poseidon spoke again, his voice ringing with unflinching authority, his words cutting through the thick hush. Even though you are a guest in my house, you will know your place, because I am the rightful ruler of the seas. Your arrogance will not be tolerated. The weight of his command grew heavier with each phrase, leaving no room for uncertainty or rebellion. The room remained silent, the watchers captivated by the unfolding scene. They watched in astonishment as Poseidon's force collided with the Potamoi's pitiful resistance. The atmosphere thickened as tension permeated the room. "Do I make myself clear?" Poseidon inquired, his voice commanding. The Potamoi finally mustered the courage to say, "Yes," gasped, "Yes, my lord." Poseidon's nod indicated his approval. "Good. Now get out of my way." With a wave of his hand, he dismissed the Potamoi. The river god quickly obliged, fleeing Poseidon's presence. Poseidon turned his gaze to the sea daimon standing behind him, a frown on his face, as the Potamoi one swiftly exited. What exactly was that all about? Poseidon received a sheepish smirk from the immortal. "Apparently, I flirted with the wrong oceanid." Poseidon locked his gaze on the immortal for a minute before breaking out laughing, his booming voice ringing throughout the room. The tension dissolved as everyone around him laughed, relieved by the unexpected change in atmosphere. Poseidon signaled the audience to continue celebrating with a wave of his hand. The music and revelry went on uninterrupted. The end.
That's it for this podcast, guys. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you did enjoy the story, and if you did, like, share, and subscribe for more. And thank you all for helping support, and have a great day.